So, good morning, everyone. And as usual, we'll start with some prayers, then a meditation on something from last week's class. We're going through the perfection of generosity. So while doing the prayers, it's good if you can to imagine the Buddha in front of you, made of light. If it's difficult to visualize, you can just think of the statue of the Buddha on the altar in front of you and feel that it isn't just a statue made of some material, but it's the real Buddha, made of light and having all the qualities of a Buddha, a fully enlightened being. Perfect wisdom, understanding the true nature of everything, infinite universal love and compassion for every living being, and being completely dedicated to helping each and every one of us to be free of all of our confusion and afflictions and suffering, so all negative things, and leading us to the state of genuine, lasting peace and happiness. So then focusing on the Buddha and having an attitude of wanting to benefit all other beings, yourself, as much as you can, now and in the future, then let's take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one God to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for. When, O supreme among humans, you are born on this earth, you pay 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow, who with pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow, who with the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the 4 faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So take a few moments to make sure your mind is really here in this place and time, and not somewhere else thinking about other things. And then refresh the bodhicitta motivation that you generated earlier today. Remember that you would like to use your life for the benefit of others, for all living beings, even working for enlightenment, becoming a Buddha, to be able to benefit all living beings in the best way possible. And feel that that is your reason for being here, participating in this class. So let's do a little meditation on the perfection of generosity. This is one of the essential practices one needs to do to become enlightened. And a bodhisattva needs to give up their attachment to all their possessions and even their body and their virtue, their merit, and be willing to give all of those things to others, although we don't have to actually do that in the beginning, but at least train the mind to think that way and overcome miserliness, stinginess. So one of the ways to increase our attitude of generosity is to think about the benefits of doing so, the benefits of generosity. So let's do a little contemplation on that. So the highest benefit is enlightenment. If we train our mind in generosity and gradually become more and more generous, willing to give, then we're creating the cause to become a fully enlightened Buddha and able to benefit all other beings. And then there are other benefits, such as having wealth and resources in our future lives. And that's important because it'll probably take many lifetimes to reach enlightenment. And we want to make sure that in our future lives we'll have all the ideal conditions to be able to continue practicing the Dharma and following the path. So that does involve having things we need, like food and clothes and shelter, so that we can devote ourselves to practice. So practicing giving, generosity, is the cause of having such resources in future lives. And even in this lifetime, there are benefits of generosity. So it makes others happy. When we give things to others, they are happy. And when we see them happy, we feel happy too. And so then we'll feel inspired to continue giving more and more. And also, when other people see us practicing giving, it can inspire them to also be more generous. And also, when we come to the end of our life, we're on our way out, dying, on our way to the next life. Attachment can be a problem at that time, having attachment to our things and our body and so on and so forth. And that can make it difficult to die with a peaceful, positive state of mind. But if we practice giving during our life and learn to loosen our attachment, overcome our attachment, that'll make it easier at the time of death to leave everything behind and just go smoothly to the next life with a peaceful mind. So see if these thoughts can inspire you to be more generous, to work on overcoming attachment and miserliness, and learn to be more generous with your things. As it says in the Guru Puja, inspire me to perfect far-reaching generosity through the instructions for enhancing the mind that gives without attachment, transforming my body, wealth, and 3 times collection of virtue into whatever each being desires. So we just have a little bit more on this perfection of generosity, and then we'll move on to the second perfection of ethics. And last week there was a question that came up about giving one's body. This is something a bodhisattva needs to do, although they shouldn't do it too soon in their development. And so the question was, like, at what point in your development on the bodhisattva path can you give your body, like the Buddha did, giving his body to the tiger family in a previous life. So I found a couple of different explanations about that. So in the Lamrim Chenmo, the great treatise on the Lamrim by Lama Tsongkhapa, he says, don't give the flesh of your body and so forth until you have developed an attitude of great compassion. Right? So you have to have great compassion before you do that. However, a more recent book, Courageous Compassion, which is volume 6 in the series by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Children. So in there it says that there's different things. First it says that bodhisattvas can give their bodies when they have no clinging to their bodies. And it says that some bodhisattvas attain this ability on the path of preparation. That's the second of the 5 paths. But then a little later in that section it says, many great masters say that bodhisattvas who have not yet reached the first ground, that's the path of seeing, when they're an Arya bodhisattva, they have direct realization of emptiness, they should not give their lives. So until you reach that point, you shouldn't give up your life, because you're not yet able to control your rebirth. And so it's better to stay alive in this life, in this body, and practice the Dharma. So there do seem to be different explanations by different masters about when you're suitable, when it's suitable for you to give your body. But I don't know, I'm nowhere near any of those yet, so I don't know. So could you put the slides up? Okay, so there's some more information on the perfection of generosity from the Lamrim Chenmo, because in this book, the Middle-Length Lamrim, the explanation is kind of short, but there's more information in the great treatise on the path. So here there are 4 hindrances to generosity, 4 things that hinder our ability to be generous. And it also gives remedies to them, how to overcome these hindrances. So the first hindrance is not being used to generosity, just not having that habit, that familiarity of being generous, giving. And one reason for this might be karma from past lives. Like in past lives, we didn't give much, and so we don't have that imprint, that tendency to give. But I think it could also be due to conditioning in this lifetime. For example, your family or the culture, society you grow up in. So if you're born into a family where people are stingy, you know, and maybe your parents advise you not to give, you know, because then you won't have what you need. So if you get that kind of message, and also just what you observe, then that would make you reluctant to give, make it difficult to give. So I think that could be another reason for not being used to it. And I was thinking there's this, what's that website? GoFundMe, is it GoFundMe, where they have these different, anybody who wants to raise money can start a fund. And there was one I read that was so beautiful, so inspiring. There's this little girl, she was only like 5 or 6 years old, over somewhere in the East Coast, and she had to go into the hospital for some reason. I think it may have been cancer or something quite serious. So she spent some time in the hospital. And while she was in the hospital, because it wasn't very far from where her family lived, her family frequently came and brought her gifts, you know, and but she noticed some of the other children in the hospital didn't have that experience. Some of them, their families lived far away, so they didn't get many visitors, they didn't get many gifts, and she felt really sad about that. And so when she finally got out of the hospital, or maybe when she was still in, she started this project to raise funds to give gifts to the other children in the hospital. And her parents, of course, helped her to do that, and they managed to raise some money and then give gifts to these other children. But the article said that her family, her parents were like that. Her parents were very, very generous and caring, and often, you know, collecting food and money and so on and giving it to those who were poor. And she would help them. So she had that kind of conditioning, and it just made it easier for her to feel that way. So it does show that, yeah, we're very easily influenced by other people, especially in our family and also friends and society. So, so even if, you know, we don't have this habit of giving, we can still change that. And so Lama Tsongkhapa recommends just contemplating that, my lack of generosity is due to not familiarizing with it in the past. If I don't practice giving, if I don't give, then I will also dislike generosity in the future. Okay, so we can change things. So we can start to be more generous, give gifts, and build up that habit. And the more we do it, we'll probably enjoy it. We'll probably find it feels really good thing to do. And then in that way, we build up that habit. So like Shantideva says, there's nothing that doesn't get easier with practice, with familiarity. I love that. It's true, yeah. We just start doing, and gradually it becomes a habit. And there's this Tibetan story that I like too about some man who was very miserly, like he just couldn't give anything away. And a teacher, a Lama, advised him to start by just giving something from one hand to the other, you know, it's like, you know, just giving to himself, handing something from one of his hands to the other, something small. And so that way he got used to giving, and then gradually could start giving things to others, small things, a cup of tea, an apple, or whatever. And slowly he built up his habit of practicing giving and was able to do it more and more. So then the second hindrance is declining fortune, meaning your money, your resources are dwindling and you're frightened, oh, if I give away, what will happen to me? I won't have enough for myself. So Lama Tsongkhapa's advice to deal with that is to think or say to yourself, I've experienced a lot of suffering while wandering in samsara and haven't helped others much. So even if I die due to giving to others, it's better for me to be generous. I'll survive somehow. So just thinking about our past lives and this life in samsara, we've been wandering in samsara countless lifetimes and experiencing a lot of suffering. And one reason for that is because we haven't been generous. We haven't practiced generosity, and that's probably why we're finding ourselves impoverished now. And so if we continue not being generous, not giving, then we'll continue having that kind of situation in the future. But if we can start practicing giving to others, then we're working our way out of this situation. We're creating the cause to have more and better in the future and eventually get out of samsara altogether. And he says, even if I give away my food and then I have nothing to eat myself, even if I die due to this, then it's still better for me to practice generosity because that will bring good experiences in the future. And I'll find some way to survive. So his advice is to make a gift after willingly accepting the suffering of poverty. Yeah. So for those who are monastics, you probably heard the Buddha dedicated a huge amount of his merit that his followers, I think it's mainly monastics, but I think it could also refer to lay followers who are sincerely practicing his teachings, that they will never die of hunger or cold. So somehow, as long as we're practicing the Dharma sincerely to the best of our ability, somehow we'll get what we need to survive. So we shouldn't need to worry. No need to worry about starving to death. Then the third hindrance is attachment, our old friend attachment. So this is when we just have attachment to our things and don't want to give them away. I want this, it's nice, I want to enjoy it, I don't want to give it away. So Lama Tsongkhapa recommends remembering the shortcomings of attachment. So there's lots of information about that, what problems we experience as a result of attachment. It can bring suffering in the future and hinders our practice of virtue and so on. And it's one of the main factors keeping us in samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth, not getting out, not getting free, not getting enlightened. So contemplate the shortcomings of attachment, and after doing that, then give. And you don't have to give everything, you don't have to give a huge amount of things, but at least start training yourself to practice giving. And it's also helpful to just contemplate attachment itself, because attachment itself it's telling us this makes me happy. This object is the source of happiness, and if I give it away, then I won't have that happiness anymore. So just check that, if that's really true. Does this object really bring happiness? Maybe a little bit of pleasure for a short period of time, but long term, I like to think of attachment as it's like fish, when fish are swimming around in a lake or in a pond, and along comes a fisherman with a fishing line and something attractive on the end, attached to that hook. Could be a worm or a cricket or something shiny, something that will attract a fish. And the fish sees that object and says, I want that. And then they're stuck. Yeah. And then they lose their life. So attachment is kind of like that, yeah. We get captivated by some object that seems attractive, seems like it's going to bring us happiness and pleasure. But then attachment itself is like getting hooked, getting stuck, and not losing your freedom. You're no longer really free because of that attachment. And that can lead to lots of problems, as everyone knows, in relationships and addictions, and yeah, just that mind itself of attachment. It's not, you're not free when you have attachment. You're stuck. You're hooked. So just to recognize that. And also the fact that when we die, we're going to have to leave everything behind. We can't take any of those things with us. And if we have strong attachment and we've never worked on it, we've never, tried to overcome it, then we're going to have a hard time. It'll be very difficult at the time of death. A lot of suffering, mental suffering, and difficult to have a positive mind at that time. So yeah, thinking of the shortcomings of attachment, really meditating on those, recognizing those, then, yeah, that'll make it easier to give. Then the fourth hindrance he mentions is not seeing the goal. The goal here refers to enlightenment, Buddhahood. That's our long-term ultimate goal in our spiritual practice. And to attain that goal, to attain enlightenment, we have to practice generosity. It's one of the requirements, one of the necessary things. And so if we think we can attain enlightenment and not practice generosity and still hang on to our things and not give them away, then it's wrong. This is mistaken. So Lama Tsongkhapa recommends to remember impermanence, how, we're impermanent and our things are impermanent. Whatever we're attached to is impermanent. We're not going to be able to have it forever. And also, I think good to remember the benefits of generosity, and then practice giving for the sake of enlightenment. Okay, and then not yet. Then also at the end of this section on generosity in the Lamrim, Lama Tsongkhapa also talks about generosity, which is just mental, which is good, for people who don't have anything, like Milarepa. Lots of meditators who really are impoverished and just have barely enough to stay alive themselves, so they aren't able to practice generosity in an actual sense, in a material sense, but they can practice mentally. So he says, go to a quiet place, withdraw your mind inward, generate a good motivation and faith, and then construct an immeasurably vast quantity of diverse gifts and imagine offering them to all living beings. So just on the mental level, visualizing lots of things, beautiful things, wonderful things, and then imagine giving those things to sentient beings. So this is actually what we do in the practice of Tonglen, taking and giving. We take the suffering of others and then give happiness to them, imagining our body and our possessions, resources, and our virtues in the form of all kinds of nice things, beautiful things, and then imagine giving those things to different beings, and they receive them and they're happy and so on. So you could spend hours doing that. And and he says, this increases merit immeasurably with little difficulty, and is the giving of wise bodhisattvas according to bodhisattva levels. That's a text by a Sangha. So he says this is how a wise bodhisattva who doesn't have much in terms of materials can practice giving until they reach the level of pure, wholehearted resolve. And so I looked that up, and it's there's 4 different levels of bodhicitta, 4 different levels as your bodhicitta develops. And this is the second of those 4 levels, the pure, wholehearted resolve. And that starts from the first ground to the 7th ground. So that means you're an Arya Bodhisattva. So from that point on, then you don't have this problem anymore of being without resources, probably because of your vast merit. Then just things will come your way. You won't have any lack of resources. But up until then, you might be a little hard-pressed to have things, but you can still practice generosity on the mental level. Although they say that we shouldn't then think, if we do have resources, we do have money and things, we shouldn't think, oh, I won't give these away, I'll just meditate, I'll just give mentally. So that's cheating. If we do have resources, we should be willing to give them. Not everything, we can keep what we need, but practice in actuality and also practice mentally. Okay, so then a summary of this section of the perfection of giving from Lama Tsongkhapa in the Lamrim Chenmo. He says, after taking the Bodhisattva vow, make prayers to learn about and practice generosity, like how to do it, what is good to give, what isn't good to give, because again, there's things that we shouldn't give to others, like weapons or poison, things that would harm them or that they would use to harm others. So there's certain things that are inappropriate to give. So we need to learn those things. Apply remedies to stinginess, miserliness, and steadily increase your generosity. Cultivate joy in giving and sorrow that you didn't do it in the past. You didn't train yourself earlier to to practice giving. So by doing these things, we can complete the perfection of generosity without much difficulty in a future life. So we may not be able to do it in this life, because the complete perfection of generosity is only when you become a Buddha. Until then, you're still training in it. And also understand that if we don't practice now, if we don't train ourselves in generosity in this life, then it will be difficult to practice it in future lives. So if we at least start training, start making steps toward being more generous, then it will help us be more generous in future lives. And then he gives a quote from a text called Compendium of the Perfections of Aryasura. It says, bodhicitta is the root of such generosity. So do not give up this motivation to make such gifts. The conqueror said, in the world, the supreme form of giving is the wish to give accompanied by bodhicitta. So again, giving is primarily the wish to give, even if you don't have the means to give, but at least training the mind to have that wish, the intention to give. And if our motivation for this practice is bodhicitta, the wish to become a Buddha, to help all living beings, then that's what makes it the perfection of generosity. Okay, so any questions about this perfection before we move on to the next one? Please.
I have a more general question, Venerable Khadro. What exactly defines a bodhisattva? So sorry, did I ask you now? At which point is a normal person a bodhisattva?
It's when they have attained uncontrived or spontaneous bodhicitta. So like, in the beginning, we meditate on bodhicitta, we meditate on love and compassion and work to cultivate that state of mind of bodhicitta. But we have to put effort into it. We have to make effort. So after a long time of practicing like that, you get to the point where bodhicitta will just arise by itself, spontaneously, without any effort. So just seeing another being and recognizing that they suffer, that thought will just arise spontaneously in your mind. I want to become enlightened to help this being and all other beings. So when it arises spontaneously like that, without effort, that's the point when you're a bodhisattva. They say it's like the thought of food when we're hungry. So if we haven't eaten for many hours and our stomach is empty and growling, then we don't have to make any effort to think about food. It'll just spontaneously pop up in our mind. So that they say it's similar with a bodhisattva, when the thought of attaining enlightenment to help all living beings just arises naturally, spontaneously in the mind. That's when you're a bodhisattva. Yes? What's your name?
My name is Steve. Thank you for your teaching today. I was wondering, I've heard different things about the order in which people should pursue the six perfections. So to what degree, if we're newer to the path, should we be really starting with generosity as a kind of beginning perfection, or to what degree should we be thinking about all of the six perfections at the same time?
Well, they are in a particular order. One reason is the ease of practice. So generosity is, for most people, easier to practice than the others. So they're kind of graded in that way or arranged in that way. But one can practice all of them at the same time. Although it takes a while to learn how to practice each one. So it probably makes more sense to go in order and learn them one by one. But yeah, ideally we do need to practice all of them. And it's said that a bodhisattva, someone who's serious about working for enlightenment, will train themselves to learn and practice each of the six perfections. And then when they're practicing one of the perfections, they also practice all the other five. That's the ideal way to practice. So like with generosity, when you're giving food or money to a homeless person, a bodhisattva would also practice ethics. They make sure they're not doing anything unethical. And patience, in case this person gets angry and asks for more. And then, you don't respond with anger. You keep patience. And then joyous effort is to have the wish to continue doing more and more and more and more, being joyful about giving. And then concentration, being able to keep your mind focused on what you're doing and not wandering away. And then wisdom, and that's more difficult, but having the understanding of emptiness, of what they call the three spheres. The giver, in the case of giving, it could be the giver, the recipient, the one person you're giving to, and the act of giving, or the substance that you're giving. So those three things that are always present whenever we do an action. There's always a subject, an object, and an action. That all those three elements of the practice are empty of inherent existence, don't exist inherently. So Bodhisattva is able to keep all those in mind. So there's a lot going on there, just in the practice of giving. But that's the ideal way to practice each of the perfections. You practice all six together within each one.
You mentioned the 4 stages of development of bodhicitta.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've heard of that before. Could you explain that?
Okay, I have to look it up. I don't remember it by heart. It's in the ornament for clear realization. Let me see, where would it be? But it does come up in other places. Okay, so yeah, it's in the ornament for clear realization, where bodhicitta is called mind generation, semkye. So there's 4 levels of mind generation. The first is called mind generation of the level of engagement through belief. I can email these to you later if you want. And that's on the first 2 paths, path of accumulation and preparation. And the second is the mind generation. Here it's called pure extraordinary thought. In Lamrim chenmo it was called a wholehearted resolve or something. I think it's laksam, Tibetan. And that's on the first 7 grounds. So Arya Bodhisattva's first 7 grounds. And the third is called the mind generation of the level of ripening. And that's on the 3 pure grounds, 8th, 9th, and 10th grounds. Ripening, that's how it's translated here, but other translators might translate it differently. This is Sugi's translation. And then the 4th is called mind generation of the level of abandonment of obscurations, and that's on the Buddha ground. So there's like different levels of bodhicitta or mind generation and different levels of the path, probably depending on the level of wisdom, how much understanding you have of emptiness, and how many obscurations you've managed to purify. There's not a whole lot of information about these. They're just sort of mentioned here, but I have seen them in other places. They do talk about these sometimes. So then, ready to move on, or any more questions about generosity? So now, perfection number 2 is ethics, and other translations are morality, ethical discipline, ethical conduct. I kind of like ethics. It's sort of short and sweet, simple. Okay, so if you have the book, it's on page 250. How to train in ethics. This has 3 points, 3 main points. The nature of ethics, its subdivisions, and how to generate ethics in one's mind. So for the nature of ethics, it says ethics is the mind of abandonment, a mentality turned away from harming others, together with its basis. And I was curious about the meaning of basis because it's not explained here. Geshe Zopa's commentary to the Lamrim Chenmo, he talks about the self-centered attitude. So I think it seems he's saying that the basis of harming others, so any thought that we might have of harming others is rooted in the self-centered attitude. Of course, it's rooted in ignorance. Ignorance about the true nature of things, that's the root of all of our problems. Believing there's a real, inherently existing I over here, and then a real, inherently existing other over there. And if they don't do what we want, or they do what we don't like, we may have thoughts of doing something harmful to them. But self-centeredness is in there as well. I'm more important than them. So if they don't do what I want, I can make them do it or harm them somehow. So there's various things going on in our mind, ignorance, self-centeredness, other afflictions that precede the thought of harming. Yeah, anytime we have a thought of harming someone else, there's afflictions underneath that. So if we understand it in that way, then what ethics means is the opposite state of mind. It's a state of mind that says, I don't want to harm. I'm giving up all thoughts of harming. And I also want to stop even that activity in my mind that gives rise to those thoughts, so that I don't even have the thought of harming. I mean, it's easier to stop ourselves from harming physically, yeah, than it is to stop the thought of harming, yeah. So we can have thoughts of wanting to harm, but we stop ourselves. We say, no, that wouldn't be a good thing to do, and I might end up in jail, and people won't like me. I mean, whatever reason. So we can stop ourselves from acting out thoughts of harm with our body, with our speech, but to actually stop those thoughts themselves, that's quite an accomplishment. To not even have the thought to do anything harmful, that's quite a high level. So this is what bodhisattvas work on, to give up even the thought of harming others. And then it says, this is mainly from the point of view of the ethics of restraint. So there's different kinds of ethics, which we'll come to next. And one of those is the ethics of restraint, which is restraining ourselves from harmful actions. But there's also the ethics of doing virtuous things. So that's when we help others, we give to others, we benefit them. That's also included in ethics. But the ethics of restraint is mainly stopping ourselves from harming others. Then he says, ethics is perfected through thoroughly completing one's familiarity with this mind more and more. So we just make our minds familiar with that state of non-harming. Non-harming is actually one of the 11 virtuous mental factors, non-harmfulness. So we already have that mental factor, and we need to increase it, to put energy into it so it's present more and more. And compassion, actually, when there isn't a mental factor called compassion, strangely enough, but they say, oh, compassion is non-harmfulness. You were talking about that the other day, right? So, I've always been puzzled by that, because compassion seems a lot more than just non-harming. You have awareness of somebody suffering and, want to help them. And of course, you don't want to harm them. You don't want to make their suffering worse. But anyway, working on non-harming and compassion and love, these will help us in our ethics. It is not that you externally establish all sentient beings in freedom from all harm without exception. And a quote from Shantideva entering the Bodhisattva way says, "The perfection of ethics is taught as achieving the mind of abandonment." So that what this is saying is the perfection of ethics is not defined by all sentient beings in the universe being free of all harm. Because they say if that's the meaning of the perfection of ethics, then no Buddha has ever achieved that, because there's still plenty of sentient beings who are being harmed. Yeah? Every day, every single day, every minute, there's sentient beings being harmed. So perfecting ethics, achieving the perfection of ethics, doesn't mean we somehow are able to protect all sentient beings from harm. That's not possible. That's not doable. But rather, the perfection of ethics is by making our own mind totally, thoroughly familiar with non-harmfulness, so that we don't even have the thought of giving harm to anyone. And that's with the bodhicitta motivation. So yeah, we have to be realistic. We can't expect, even though we may wish to, that's our wish on the bodhisattva path, we wish sentient beings to not experience any harm, and we would like to protect all of them from harm, but realistically that isn't possible. Even a Buddha, right? Even all the Buddhas are not able to do that. But at least we can ensure that our own mind is free of thoughts of harm. So that's what it means to perfect ethics. Does that make sense? And then Geshe, just some additional information from Geshe Zopa's commentary. So he says, there's a natural progression in the way that the Buddha taught the perfections. And if we are generous, we practice the first perfection, but we lack ethics, then we could end up as a wealthy animal, which definitely happens. Yeah, so you sometimes hear these stories about some extremely wealthy person, a millionaire, and they die and they leave all their wealth to their pet dog or cat, something like that. So I don't know how that actually works practically, but anyway, there are very wealthy animals. And even our dear feline friends here, they have everything they need. And more. So generosity, practicing giving, practicing generosity is the cause of having wealth, having resources, okay? But if you don't practice ethics, then ethics is the main cause of having a good rebirth in a fortunate realm, like a human realm. So if we slip on our ethics, we don't practice ethics, then we may be born as an animal, or even worse. But if you practice giving, generosity, but not ethics, then you could be a wealthy being in the unfortunate realms, which is very tragic. Because, like Geshe Zopa says, as an animal, you don't know how to create virtue. You're not capable of creating merit, creating virtue. So you have this comfortable life, everything you could possibly need and more in the animal realm. But once that life comes to an end, then you could be born in an even worse situation, because you haven't used that life to improve your situation, to create merit, to be born in a better situation. And he quotes a verse from Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way, chapter 2, saying, "Wealth through generosity is found even in the lower realms." Yeah, they say Nagas. Nagas is a kind of animal too, and they're supposed to be very wealthy. They have a lot of jewels and gold and things. And this situation occurs when one has fractured the legs of morality. So they sometimes, yeah, that expression, the legs of morality. So if you fractured the legs of morality or ethics, then this is what can happen. When interest and capital itself are both exhausted, no prospects remain for one of any future wealth. So interest in capital is like, I guess, what is that? Capital is your virtue, and then interest would be the good results of virtue. So like, yeah, capital would be the cause of receiving wealth, and then that is the interest. And once you've exhausted that, but you've also exhausted the capital, then not much chance of having a good situation in the future beyond that. Anyway, so that's a danger we need to avoid. And if we practice both generosity and ethics, then we'll have a good rebirth and resources, what we need, so that we can continue practicing the Dharma and creating merit. Okay, then the subdivisions. This has 3 points: the ethics of restraint, the ethics of gathering virtuous qualities, and the ethics of bringing about the welfare of sentient beings. So this next paragraph is kind of difficult. There's some things in here that are puzzling, but I found some extra material from commentary by Geshe Jama Gyatso in Italy. The ethics of restraint. From the point of view of being accompanied by a motivation, the ethics of restraint is the 10 abandonments that abandon the 10 non-virtues. So abandoning the 10 non-virtues, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, idle talk, then covetousness, malice, and wrong views. So those 10 non-virtues, abandoning those, is the ethics of restraint. Then he says, from the point of view of its nature, it is the 7 abandonments of body and speech that abandon the 7 non-virtues. So that itself is a little puzzling. So, so let's see. So Geshe Jamba Gyatso's commentary, says, the ethics of restraint from the point of view of being together with its motivation is the 10 abandonments that abandon the 10 non-virtues. On the other hand, from the point of view of its entity or nature, it is the 7 abandonments, the 3 of body and 4 of speech, of the 7 non-virtues. So why only 7 and not 10? He goes on to say, motivated by covetousness, malice, or wrong view. So those are the 3 non-virtues of mind. So those are motivations. Those are minds that can motivate us to engage in the other 7 actions. So motivated by those 3 non-virtues of mind, then we engage by means of our body in killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and by means of our speech in lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle talk. Thus, when these 7 non-virtues of body and speech are together with their motivations, the 3 non-virtues of mind, then there are 10 abandonments. So that's an explanation of the first sentence, which is saying from the point of view of being accompanied by a motivation, then there's 10 non-virtues. And then he says, and does that make sense? Anyway, it's basically saying that's what's involved in the ethics of restraint, is abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions. And then the second part is from the point of view of nature. And Geshe-la says, the ethics of restraint is the abandonments of the 3 non-virtuous actions of body and 4 non-virtuous actions of speech. And he says, this is because, this is puzzling, this is because it is not possible to take a vow that counteracts non-virtuous paths of action of mind, since the mind can't be stopped. So he doesn't say any more about that. And I was like, what? But I was thinking, because they say vows, in the Vaibhashika school and the Prasangika school, they say vows are a subtle kind of form, right? Subtle kind of form. And being form, although a subtle type of form, it has the ability to stop something else that's form, like body and speech. And I was looking up Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha, where he talks about this. And there's this analogy of being like a dam or like a dike, something that can stop water from flowing. So the vows are sometimes compared to that. They're like a dike or a dam that will stop our energy from coming out, our negative energy from coming out in our body and our speech. So vows themselves are form, so they can stop non-virtuous actions of body and speech, but they can't stop the mind, because the mind is not form. That's what I'm thinking, is what he's saying here. But I'm not sure. But anyway, these first 2 sentences they seem to be 2 different ways of dividing ethics of restraint. One is from the point of view of motivation, the other is from the point of view of nature. And but basically we are refraining, we are stopping ourselves from non-virtuous actions, mainly non-virtuous actions of body and speech, but also working on stopping our mind from engaging in non-virtues as well. So I think this is probably something they discuss and debate in the monasteries. It's a geshe level topic, like what exactly is the ethics of restraint, and they probably come up with all these different points and so on and so forth. So, but I think for ourselves, for practical purposes, ethics of restraint is just restraining ourselves from non-virtuous actions of body and speech. Okay, then the second part of that paragraph says, this is the intention of the statement in Bodhisattva levels, a text by a Sangha, that the ethics of restraint in the mind of a Bodhisattva is the 7 types of pratimoksha vows. So, how many types of pratimoksha vows are there? 8. Here it says 7. So I think the one that's omitted is the one-day vows. Because Geshe, maybe because that's only for 24 hours. That doesn't count. The other 7 are life vows. You promise to keep those from, till the end of your life. So the 7, what are the 7 then? The lifelong ones? fully ordained monks, fully ordained nuns.
the novice monks and nuns,
Yeah.
the training rules, training ones, shikshamanas for the nuns, and then for the lay people, men and women.
Male and female lay practitioners, yeah. So 5 of the 7 are monastic. So among this group, there's representatives of all of those, I think. Oh, we don't have novice nuns. Yeah. Anyway, there's 5 for ordained people, and then for lay people 2. But I mean, they're basically the same, but they divide them for male and female. So those are the 7 types of pratimoksha vows that are included here in the ethics of restraint. And these are vows taken for life. And then he says, when those who possess the pratimoksha vows possess the bodhisattva vows, the ethics of restraint is the actual lay or monastic pratimoksha vows and the abandonments and vows common to them in their minds. So that last bit I don't fully understand. So if you have pratimoksha vows, any of those 7 levels, and on top of that you also have bodhisattva vows, so you're a practitioner of the bodhisattva path, so the ethics of restraint refers to your pratimoksha vows, which I also find kind of puzzling, because it almost sounds in this explanation like the bodhisattva vows are not included in the ethics of restraint. Whereas other commentaries, like Courageous Compassion, volume 6, isn't it? Yeah, so in the explanation in there for the ethics of restraint, it does mention the other kinds of vows too, like bodhisattva vows and tantric vows. Those are also included in the ethics of restraint. But here he's only talking about the pratimoksha vows. But yeah, often there's different explanations of things. Not everyone agrees. Okay, then he goes on to talk about other kinds of beings besides us. He says, when those who are unsuitable as bases for the pratimoksha vows possess bodhisattva vows, the ethics of restraint is the abandonments and restraints of abandoning either the natural misdeeds or the prescribed misdeeds that are common to pratimoksha. So, Geshe Jamba Gyatso's commentary mentions that, those who are unsuitable to take pratimoksha vows, that includes gods, devas, anti-gods, asuras, so those are beings in other realms, also nagas. So those kinds of beings can take bodhisattva vows, apparently. They can take bodhisattva vows, but they can't take pratimoksha vows. So pratimoksha vows are only available in the human realm. And also, among human beings, they talk about the 4 continents, like in the mandala. There's 4 continents around Mount Meru. We're in the southern continent. So the beings in the northern continent are also not able to take pratimoksha vows because they are unable to generate renunciation, because their lifespan is fixed at 1,000 years. They have a 1,000-year lifespan, and I guess they have a pretty comfortable life during all that time. They don't have financial problems and so forth. So because they have such a good life, it's not possible for them to generate renunciation, the mind of definite emergence. So that's needed to take the pratimoksha vow. So they are not able to do that. But the other human beings in the other 3 continents can. So there are some beings, some sentient beings who can't take pratimoksha vows, but they can take bodhisattva vows. So those other beings can take bodhisattva vows. So for those beings, who have bodhisattva vows but not pratimoksha vows, then the ethics of restraint, as said here, is the abandonments and restraints of abandoning either the natural misdeeds. So what are natural misdeeds? Natural misdeeds. Things that are naturally negative for anybody, like killing other beings, stealing their belongings. So no matter who does those actions, it's negative. Even animals, they create negative karma when they do that. And then proscribed misdeeds, what are those?
The things that the Buddha asked us not to do.
Right. So for his followers, the Buddha laid down rules or precepts like not taking alcohol. Okay, so for monastics, that's one of our precepts, is to not drink alcohol. Drinking alcohol is not naturally non-virtuous. Yeah. Some may disagree with that, but anyway, I mean, it certainly can lead to a lot of problems, but not for everybody. Some people are able to just take, a little bit of wine and that's it, and they don't get addicted, and it doesn't create any suffering. So it's not naturally non-virtuous, but for Buddha's followers, especially monastics, the Buddha said, if you're a monastic, you can't drink alcohol, and that's extended to other kinds of intoxicants. And it's also one of the lay precepts for those who choose to take all 5 of the lay vows, and they abstain from alcohol. So that's an example of a proscribed precept or misdeed. So if we take in a vow to not drink alcohol, and then we drink alcohol, then it becomes negative, it becomes non-virtuous, because you're breaking that vow. So in the case of these other kinds of beings, like gods, for example, if they have the bodhisattva vows, so for them, the ethics of restraint would be restraining themselves from natural misdeeds and or prescribed misdeeds. Yeah, because the Buddha, there was a statement the Buddha made, I don't know what sutra, but something like, any follower of mine shouldn't take even a drop of alcohol that fits on the tip of a knife or something like that. So there's a statement like that makes it really clear that the Buddha really doesn't want us to drink even a drop. So if you, take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and want to follow the Buddha's teachings, then you would try your best to refrain from drinking alcohol. So even if you don't have a vow, you don't have a precept, but if you're restraining yourself from those things, then that would be the ethics of restraint. So that seems to be what it's saying here. Then, I don't know, this last sentence says, although the pratimoksha vows in the mind of a bodhisattva are ethical vows, they are not actual bodhisattva vows. So I don't know, maybe someone might think that way. Like if you're a bodhisattva and you have the pratimoksha vows, you also have bodhisattva vows. Your pratimoksha vows don't become bodhisattva vows. Even though you are a bodhisattva, they're still pratimoksha vows. Whereas the other vows share a basis with the bodhisattva vows. So the other vows, it's not explained here, but Geshe Jamba Gyatso said, perhaps the other vows refers to the concentration vows and the uncontaminated vows. So the only place where I've heard of those is Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha. I've never heard them anywhere else. Have you heard them? Concentration vows, do they mention them in the Chinese tradition? Concentration vows and uncontaminated vows, they do talk about them. Okay, so it's kind of unusual. But concentration vows, if I remember, it's when you have concentration, when you have one of the concentrations, one of the jhanas, and when you're in a state of concentration, your mind just naturally doesn't do anything non-virtuous. So that's the meaning of a concentration vow. It's like, as I understand it, that state of concentration just holds your mind back from doing anything non-virtuous. And the uncontaminated vows would only be in the mind of someone who's an Arya, who has direct realization of emptiness. But again, I think it only applies to when they're in that meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness. So again, that mental state is so powerful that it just stops you from doing anything non-virtuous. So those are higher levels of vows for beings who've attained those higher levels of realization. So Geshe Jama Gyatso says he thinks maybe that's what's being referred to here. So the other vows, concentration and contaminated vows, do share a basis with bodhisattva vows. So anyone who has those types of vows, there are also bodhisattva vows. But our pratimoksha vows are not. I don't know why, he doesn't explain, but that's why I say this paragraph is kind of a little complicated. But I think for us, for practical purposes, then we can just think that the ethics of restraint refers to refraining from the 10 non-virtuous actions, but also includes whatever pratimoksha vows we have. So whether 5 lay vows or the 10 novice vows or the hundreds of fully ordained vows, those would also be included in the ethics of restraint. But like I say, from the way it's read here, it sounds like it doesn't include bodhisattva vows. They're not included, but other sources do say that bodhisattva vows and tantric vows are also included in the ethics of restraint. But anyway, the bottom line is restraining ourselves from non-virtue. That's the meaning of ethics of restraints. Anything that's non-virtuous, whether it's naturally non-virtuous or it's non-virtuous because the Buddha laid down a precept about it, then we restrain ourselves from those things. Any questions? Then the second is the ethics of gathering virtuous qualities. So this is to observe virtues such as the 6 perfections and to generate those that have not yet arisen in one's own mind, to not degenerate those that have arisen, and to increase them more and more. That's similar to that dedication prayer that we recite. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born, what is it? How does it go? And not decline, but increase more and more. Yeah, so to generate any virtuous state of mind or any virtuous quality or any virtuous behavior, activity, so generate those that we haven't yet generated, and those we already have, to not let them degenerate, not lose them, and increase more and more those that we already have. So that's just a very general. In Geshe Lodin's book, The Path to Enlightenment in Tibetan Buddhism, he says that the first type of ethics, the ethics of restraint, is also the second type. So when we're restraining ourselves from non-virtue, we're saying, I'm not going to kill, I'm not going to steal, and we're really doing those things, that itself is virtuous. So we're also creating virtue when we restrain ourselves from non-virtue. And he says, yeah, other examples of virtue would be the 10 virtuous actions. So not killing, of course, is virtuous, but also the opposite of that would be saving lives. So if we ever have the opportunity to save a being, an animal or insect or even a human being from being killed or harmed, then that's virtuous. So each of the 10 non-virtuous actions has an opposite kind of behavior. So those are virtues. And then, of course, the 6 perfections, and then doing things like making prostrations, making offerings, learning about and meditating on the Lamrim, the 3 principal aspects of the path, teaching the Dharma, rejoicing, and so on. So there's a lot of different kind of practices that are virtuous. So anytime we cultivate those is the second type of ethics. The third is the ethics of bringing about the welfare of sentient beings. So this is to accomplish appropriately the welfare of sentient beings in this and future lives through ethics free of misdeeds. So Geshe Loden says that this third one includes any form of Dharma practice that we do and all actions of body, speech, and mind that we do motivated by the wish to benefit others. So anytime we have the thought, I want to benefit others, and then do even meditation, prayers, recitation of mantras and sutras with that motivation, that's included in the third one. But on top of that, we actually offer service to others or practice generosity, material giving and so on. So those are also included in the ethics, the third type of ethics. And also he says the first one, ethics of restraint, is also the third one. So restraining ourselves from killing and harming and so on. That's also bringing about the welfare of sentient beings because they don't want to be harmed. Lama Zopa Rinpoche once said something about how this is, to refrain from harming others, refrain from killing and harming others. This is the best social work we could do. We hear about people doing all this social work and humanitarian work, and it's wonderful, of course, all the things they're doing. But just our taking that precept and keeping that precept to not kill, to not harm, that's also social work. Because he said it means that all sentient beings are safe from you. They have nothing to fear from you. They will not be harmed from you. So you are protecting all sentient beings from harm, from you anyway. So it says that's like social work, doing something for the welfare of sentient beings. Then there's also a list of 11 ways of working for the benefit of others, but we don't have time for that today. I'll do that next week. So anyway, those are the 3 types of ethics. Any last questions before we finish, or comments?
You were speaking about how compassion isn't actually listed as one of the 11 virtuous mental factors, but that it's actually non-harmfulness. Is that what we're generating in the 4 measurables? Mm-hmm. Non-harmfulness. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, yeah, the 4 measurable thoughts are love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And so this is explained in Abhidharma Kosha by Vasubandhu, the entity of those 4. Love is also not a mental factor called love. It's non-anger. The entity of love is non-anger. The entity of compassion is non-harmfulness. So that's those mental factors that are included in the four immeasurables. Yeah, I always wondered about that. Why? I don't know. I mean, I think it was the Buddha, as far as I know, the Buddha who named all these mental factors, and yeah, so why?
Preparing that talk the other day, I got confused about the Tibetan word for compassion and the Tibetan word for non-harm are different.
Mm-hmm.
And His Holiness has kind of expanded definition of compassion is quite broad. So then I got confused about when we use compassion, we use it for all of those things and all those situations, it seems. So I don't know that this can be answered now, but I'm very curious now to understand what's the difference between these two words and what context they're used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, usually when they explain the mental factors, they don't give a lot of explanation. They just give the definition and, but else, yeah, we can try to explore that and see. But it's always been something I've wondered about. Why don't they just call it compassion? Maybe because non-harmfulness is easier than compassion. You can stop yourself from harming a sentient being who might be really annoying you, but it's a little harder to actually have compassion for them. Maybe that's the reason. So it kind of starts with non-harmfulness, stopping yourself from harming, but then ideally we want to go beyond that. We want to actually have love and compassion and all these other states for them. But that's just a guess. I don't really know. A lot of things to learn. Endless. Okay, so we'll stop there and dedicate the merit.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lusang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.